headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. U.S. sanctions on Venezuela are impacting thousands of citizens who are beneficiaries of the PDVSA health programs. That's according to a statement issued by Venezuela's foreign ministry. 25 Venezuelan children who traveled to Italy awaiting bone marrow transplants are now at risk. This as the illegal blockade hinders their reception of funds to pay for their necessary treatments. The statement goes on to say that PDVSA's health agreement benefits hundreds of patients undergoing treatment in the health centers abroad, as well as more than 500,000 patients within Venezuela. They receive care for chronic illnesses such as HIV, cancer, Parkinson's disease, and epilepsy, and financing for surgeries and treatments associated with pancreas, liver, and bone marrow transplants. The government has called on the international community to act in accordance with the UN Charter to end the United States policy of aggression against Venezuela. On Saturday, Venezuela marked 17 years since the defeat of the 2002 failed coup, a date which coincides with the creation of the Bolivarian Militia. 13A, or what's been called the National Day of Dignity, was marked by an event in Caracas attended by President Nicolas Maduro, members of the Bolivarian Militia, and members of the armed forces. The civilian militia was created in 2008 by Commander Hugo Chavez and works in support of the armed forces. President Maduro says that he aims to raise the number of militia members from 2 million to 3 million by year's end. The president has encouraged the militia to become involved in the country's agricultural production.
As the workers' president, as the citizen president that I am, I call on the people to work, to persevere, and to continue forward in a successful way this process of definitive freedom from the ties of the Yankee Empire. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Our people should shout. Only a true revolution can do this. A true revolution like our Bolivarian revolution. With your rifles on your shoulders, be ready to defend the fatherland and dig the furrow to plant the seeds to produce food for the community, for the people, for our whole country.
The revolutionary people of Venezuela are maintaining their call to the United States to end its intervention in the country's internal affairs.
These are the Bolivarian militias, the fifth component of the armed forces. United States Vice President Mike Pompeo's visit to Cucuta, just a few meters from here at the Tienditas Bridge, coincides with the celebration of the defeat of the United States coup against President Hugo Chavez 17 years ago. The Venezuelan people led mass protests which saw Chavez returned to power. That battle saw the birth of the militias, who are now responsible for Venezuela's defense. This defense can at times include more simple tasks like providing support for the armed forces, as they did on February 23rd, to managing weaponry, the sum of which is the civic military union.
We are here and we will not take any steps back. We have our knee to the ground in defense of Bolivar, the homeland of Hugo Chavez.
Pompeo's visit is part of Donald Trump's electoral campaign, an infamous strategy that comes with the cost of Venezuelan suffering. However, Venezuelans say they will continue to resist and show the world the true aggressor. For the Venezuelan government, Pompeo's visit serves to incite a reaction from the country.
It's an act of provocation. The United States ought to keep its hands off Venezuela and must be convinced that we don't accept any type of control over us or anyone telling us what to do. We are a free people, an independent people. That's why there is a war. There is war because they decided to interfere and attempt to end the Bolivarian revolution. The Venezuelan people have definitely chosen to be free and independent. Either they surrender or we will defeat them.
The armed forces continue to be deployed to maintain peace, much like on February 23rd, when foreign interventionists attempted to use violence to push through their supposed humanitarian aid.
Foreign forces are attempting to cripple us and create a state that cannot be governed. The armed forces are here united with the people to guarantee that we maintain and sustain control of our institutions.
The border bridges are closed and serve as obstacles to deter any attempt to deliver the supposed humanitarian aid by force. The pedestrian pathway has been opened, with people leaving and returning to Venezuela on a daily basis.
Cuba's parliament held its third extraordinary session days after the island's new constitution was officially adopted. 572 lawmakers, along with the first secretary of the Communist Party, Raul Castro, and President Miguel Diaz-Canel, analyzed the government's plan for social and economic development for the year 2030. During this session, the Assembly agreed on an absolute rejection of the hostile policies of the United States against Cuba. President Miguel Diaz-Canel called on Cubans to strengthen the country's defenses and economy.
Clearly, the U.S. government is looking to tighten the fence around Cuban sovereignty, worsening the blockade and, in particular, financial persecution. U.S. pressure obstructs credit and financing of third countries, while internally we still drag along the cargo of administrative inefficiency and importer mentality, a lack of savings, and an insufficient income for exports, among other ills of which we cannot exclude the manifestation of corruption and illegality.
Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel is expressing concern for 2 Cuban doctors who were kidnapped in Kenya. Diaz-Canel tweeted that Cuba strives tirelessly to have doctors Acel Herrera Correa and Landy Rodriguez return to safety. He went on to say that Cuba joins their families in respecting their humanitarian mission, adding that the country believes in the power of solidarity. Our correspondent Oscar Epelde has more from Nairobi.
Military forces are continuing to search for the kidnapped Cuban doctors. Now they're looking inside Somali territory. We don't know many details of these operations. Both the Kenyan authorities and the Cuban medical mission are keeping very quiet about these because obviously their top priority is to find the doctors Acel Herrera Correa and Landy Rodriguez safe and sound as quickly as possible. They were kidnapped at 9 o'clock on Friday morning as they traveled from their house to the county hospital in Mandera, where they were working. It's believed they were taken immediately into Somalia. The border is only a kilometer from that hospital. So 3 days later, the chances of finding them does seem to have increased. A number of similar kidnappings have been successfully resolved just a few days after they happened and without any ransom being paid. In parallel with this, the Council of Elders in Mandera, which is a region with an ethnic Somali majority, is engaged in talks with the elders of Burahawa on the Somali side of the border to try to find a negotiated solution. They will certainly be explaining to their counterparts in Somalia the importance of the humanitarian work being done by these Cuban doctors. They'd already treated more than 7,000 patients, not only Kenyans, but also Ethiopians and Somalis from the Burahawa region. And they hope the elders there will be able to have some influence on members of the community who may know something about the whereabouts of the Cuban doctors. Nothing for certain is known about the identity of the group that carried out the kidnapping. Some authorities are pointing at Al-Shabaab, which has been responsible for many of the kidnappings in Kenya in recent years. But it could also be one of the many criminal gangs that have emerged in these last few decades of war and instability. But it is clear that the Kenyan authorities are putting a lot of effort into bringing this case to a successful conclusion because, among other things, they want to protect the country's reputation and ensure a secure atmosphere for the country's very important tourist industry. We'll be keeping you updated with the latest information.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. There needs to be a greater collaboration among member states on issues of crime and security affecting the CARICOM region. This was the view of the Council for National Security and Law Enforcement, which saw the Caribbean community's ministerial officers present. Grenada's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, chaired the 20th Council meeting, which was held in St. George's on Friday. The Council agreed that increased coordination would achieve more significant results in the battle against the flow of illegal drugs and guns, transnational crime, and heightened incidents of homicide. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown is criticizing the Organization of American States for its recognition of the supposed ambassador of the Venezuelan opposition. On Tuesday, the OAS voted to recognize Gustavo Tarra as the official representative to the organization as part of its bid to oust President Nicolas Maduro. In a Facebook post, Brown said that the OAS has shown that it is not a democratic institution, adding that the powerful could exert undue influence to promote their agenda. Brown also recognized that Venezuela's constitution does not provide for the removal of a president by force. He further cautioned Caribbean leaders against becoming stalking horses for military intervention in Venezuela. He said that if military intervention occurs, resulting in carnage in Venezuela, these leaders should be held fully responsible.
Disturbing trend in which any simple majority of 18 member states.
Drilling equipment has arrived in Port Kingstown in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the geothermal project is set to begin this month. Ships containing 90 40-foot containers and drilling rigs were loaded onto heavy-duty trucks to be transported to the rig site. The results of the drilling exercise will be known in June 2019. It will give an indication of the available resource for a planned geothermal power plant, which will spur economic activity in the country.
Thrive in it too. Members of the
Trinidad and Tobago's women's rights activist and singing sensation Calypso Rose fell on stage during her performance at the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival on Friday. But the 78-year-old songstress, who is the oldest person to ever perform at the event, quickly rose to her feet to set the crowd on fire. The Calypso Queen of the World stumbled as she sang her 2019 hit song, Young Boy, alongside soca star Machel Montano in the Californian desert. She was dancing near a fan when she slipped and fell backwards. While being helped in a sitting position, Rose continued performing. The government of Belize has revoked a license of the Atlantic International Bank Limited, or ABLE, after clients began to withdraw from the bank due to its involvement in a fraud-related case. The country's central bank governor, Joy Grant, said she made the decision after a series of events unfolded on November 8, 2018. She said that the bank was named as a defendant in a matter involving the sale of land and a property development known as Sanctuary Belize. Grant said soon after, a temporary restraining order was obtained against some of ABLE's liquid assets in the United States, which led to an unusual increase in withdrawal requests from customers facing extended delays in accessing their funds. As a result, she recommended that the government move in accordance with Sections 25 and 27(1) of the International Banking Act to revoke the bank's license.
A set of offshore services catered to meet the needs of our individual.
Thousands of Uruguayans gathered in Montevideo's Freedom Square to demand justice for crimes committed during the country's last civic military dictatorship.
It was a cry for justice that resounded in Montevideo and other parts of the country. Protesters rallied in defense of democracy and against impunity following the recent disclosure of records from the country's military court. The record showed that 3 military officials admitted to participating in illegal detentions, torture, assassination, and abductions.
This is a call to defend our democracy and fight against impunity because after almost 34 years since the end of the dictatorship, there have been only a handful of cases where officials who committed crimes against humanity have been charged.
Virginia Mato, the daughter of communist military official Miguel Mato, who was forcibly disappeared, calls for support from democratic institutions. According to her statement, she also demands the dismissal of the minister and the deputy minister of defense, chief army commander, and 6 of the 15 currently serving generals.
These protests have shown that it is possible to end impunity and the code of silence about criminal activities that is entrenched in the military. It is also possible to demand that senior officials compare with constitutional norms.
Demonstrators know that the justice is dependent on gathering evidence of the dictatorship and launching independent investigations. They say a lot of these facts can be found in the military court's archive.
The justice system must take action. Justice has been evaded for far too long. If the military court has all the records and can bring new elements into the investigations, then charges should be brought quickly.
Victims of the dictatorship say confessions have surfaced decades ago, but the government did not have the will to investigate them.
We are here to defend democracy because this new information has confirmed what we have been denouncing and calling on the state to act upon. The government must end impunity for crimes against humanity.
The demonstrations were organized by a group of mothers and relatives of detained that were forcibly disappeared. The PITCNT, an organization of former political prisoners, the Uruguayan University Student Federation, and the Cooperative Movement.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In Iran, massive protests were held on Friday denouncing U.S. President Donald Trump's blacklisting of Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, the IRGC, as a foreign terrorist organization. In the capital, Tehran, after Friday's prayers, thousands of citizens protested and expressed their support for the IRGC, burning the U.S. flag. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister issued a letter to the United Nations which said that the country's 80 million people strongly condemned Trump's move. The former head of Sudanese National Intelligence and Security Service has stepped down. Protesters hold Salah Abdallah Mohammed Salah responsible for the killing of demonstrators demanding an end to military rule. Camping outside of the army headquarters, protesters are calling for a civilian government and have vowed to keep pressure on the military council, which took power following the ousting of Omar al-Bashir.
So far, we have nothing else. The demands have not been met until now. The sit-in will continue until our demands are met.
The people should not stop until all demands are met, regardless of the consequences. If they fail, nothing will happen. We have an example like Egypt. 8 years ago, they pushed them out of the Tahrir Square. Until today, no one is allowed into the Tahrir Square. If the people leave their position, expect this revolution to fail and expect them to disappear.
We want actions. We do not want statements. We want a man to give us pictures of those who violated our lives for all those years inside prison.
About 121 people have been killed in Tripoli, Libya, since the attack by the Khalifa Haftar's led army on April 4th, according to the World Health Organization. With more than 560 people wounded, the WHO said it was sending more medical supplies and staff to Tripoli. The health organization has denounced attacks on health workers. In Somalia, hundreds of rickshaw drivers protested in the streets of Mogadishu after a police officer shot and killed one driver and his passenger. Another 4 were shot during the protests. shot and killed during the protests. The reason for the initial shooting is still unknown. The streets of Mogadishu have been left filled with black smoke after protesters burned tires. In Nigeria, more than 100 schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram are still missing. Sunday marked the 5th anniversary of their kidnapping. On April 14, 2014, Boko Haram gunmen stormed the Chibok girls' boarding school and kidnapped 276 pupils, ages 12 to 17. After government negotiations with the gunmen, 107 of the girls either escaped, were released in exchange for prisoners, or were recovered by the army. No news has been heard about the remaining kidnapped girls.
This message is to those who hold our children. What did we do to you? And what do they want from us? Please, release our girls. Come back to us. We need them. Every parent wants to see their children close to them. Please, whether they are alive or not, allow them to come back.
The government of Mozambique and aid agencies are in a race against time as famine looms, and with the logistical challenges which have come in the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. Buzi District, one of the affected areas hit by Cyclone Idai, has seen all of its crops wiped out. The crops were essential for residents. According to the United Nations, 1 million people have received aid, but not everyone in the affected areas have been reached due to lack of access.
I am suffering. I don't have any food or a place to sleep, not even seedlings to replant.
There are a lot of challenges. Logistics is a very difficult issue. There are still many areas that can only be accessible by helicopter or not even a landing land. So the roads are being cleared since the disaster happened, but there's still a lot of places that cannot be accessible.
The lawyer for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, Jennifer Robinson, says that Assange would seek assurances that being extradited to Sweden would not lead to a further extradition to the United States.
If Sweden makes an extradition request, there will be a question for the Home Secretary about which case will take precedence, and we will certainly be asking for the same assurances that we asked before, which is that he wouldn't be sent to the United States after dealing with it. That is the same assurance we were seeking in 2010, and the refusal to give that is why he sought asylum when he did.
So otherwise?
And British Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has said that he would support Julian Assange's extradition to Sweden instead of the United States, where he faces charges of conspiracy.
I've made it very clear all along that if there are allegations which Julian Assange needs to answer of sexual issues, sexual attacks that may or may not have taken place in Sweden, then it's a matter for the courts to decide, but I do think he should answer those questions. My objection was to his extradition to the United States, because I do believe that WikiLeaks told us the truth about what was actually happening in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Finland's Social Democrats leader has declared himself winner in the country's parliamentary election with 17.8% of votes, with 97% of the ballots counted. Their closest rival is the Finns, with 17.6% of the votes thus far, with the right-wing National Coalition candidate in third place. The party of outgoing Prime Minister scored fourth with 15.4%. If confirmed, Antti Rinne will become the first left-leaning prime minister in 2 decades. We end in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, where a mass rally was held in Pyongyang on Saturday. It was a celebration of Kim Jong-un's re-election as chairman of the State Affairs Commission at the first session of the 14th Supreme People's Assembly earlier this week. Thousands of people, including high-ranking officials, military officers, and Pyongyang citizens, attended the rally at Kim Il-sung Square. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.